I have two RX 580s. One of them I got off Amazon, one of them I got from AliExpress. One of them smells like plastic, the other one also smells like plastic. One of them works great and is amazing, and one of them is broken. Today, I'm going to tell you which one I think you should buy and which one is a total freaking scam. Roll the intro. Hello, hi, I'm TechDweeb, welcome, thanks for clicking on the video today. When you buy something off AliExpress, I think most of us know by now that there's no guarantee that you'll get what you want, or even something that works. There have been GPU scams going on since the dawn of time, and sites like AliExpress seem to be especially rife with them. Do you like my use of the word rife? I just learned that word yesterday. It's a good word. My vocabulary is super rife with it now. I've had some good and bad times ordering expensive GPUs from AliExpress. In the past, a few years ago, I fell for the GTX 1050 Ti scam. You know that Rife thing where they take an old GTS 450 and flash it with like a fake BIOS and an ugly shroud to disguise it as something better? Yeah, I fell for that, like a Rife idiot. But then I also bought an off-brand RX 580 from AliExpress a few months ago, and it turned out to be great, totally legit, and it worked amazing. I used it in a PC build, and it's still going rife actually. But I got a little too overconfident, I must admit. This here is another RX 580 that I bought off AliExpress. It was the cheapest RX 580 that they had on there. It was just 80 bucks. And as excited as I was to get a real authentic Jizunzer GPU, my excitement turned to mush. Like a mushy cracker. And not like in some soup where you actually want mushy crackers. Like it came out of the box mushy. This GPU was a total freaking scam. It should not have passed QA, if that even exists over at Jizunzer. I'm going to make a separate video on this GPU because it's kind of a funny story about what went down. So get subscribed so you don't miss that. So it's a bit of a gamble ordering from AliExpress because you may or may not get what you paid for. And if you don't, then you may or may not get your money back. In my first video about the graphics player RX 580 2048 SP that I reviewed, I had a few comments asking if I'd review this Aisurix version, specifically because it's available on Amazon. Your wish is my command. I will literally make any video that you ask me to make. I have one of them right here, and we're gonna check it out in this video. I'd never heard of this company before, but they actually seem like a real company. They have a website at least. It's not the best website, I think we can all agree on that. But at least they have a brand name and a website. Maybe it's because my last AliExpress GPU experience was so bad, but this GPU has turned out so well. It has exceeded my expectations in so many ways that I'm actually really impressed in the value. That you can get this for $120 on Amazon. Yeah, it's not as cheap as the $80 on AliExpress, but considering the scammy nature of AliExpress, I think that many people, myself included, are going to be more comfortable buying a product from Amazon because at least you know that you're going to be able to get your money back if something goes wrong. And you don't have to wait a freaking month and a half to get it. But full disclosure, I reached out to this company to ask them if they'd send me a review unit. And to my surprise, they did. They were super nice in their emails, they responded immediately, they spoke English, and they sent me this, and it arrived at my door the next freaking day. I was gonna buy one to review anyways, but I get a good feeling about a company when they're responsive and actually care about showing off their products, for better or worse. At 120 bucks, it's so cheap that it's probably going to be a popular choice for people building a budget system today. It's likely going head to head against other cheap GPUs like the 6500 XT. Speaking of which, stick around to the end of the video because as a bonus, I'm going to be doing that comparison. I'm running this in my test rig that I built in this video, link in the description below, with an i5 10400 processor, a B560 motherboard, 16 gigabytes of 3200 megahertz RAM, and an NVMe SSD system drive, with the games being loaded from a SATA hard disk storage drive. I'm running with the latest AMD drivers here. As you can see in the GPU-Z, this is detected as an RX 580 2048 SP. I'm going to start with The Witcher 3 today because this is the game that I used to compare the last RX 580 2048 SP that I had with my MSI RX 580 that I had. This is the comparison that I did in that last video. And the graphics player 2048 SP did perform basically the same as the normal MSI RX 580, 64 FPS on average. So how does this Aisurix version stack up? Well, this was a little weird. This Aisurix version of the RX 2048 SP did substantially better than both of the previous versions. I got 68 FPS here on average, compared to the 64 FPS on average I got with the previous two cards. Now, granted, there might be something else going on. Maybe this game got an update. Maybe there's something else I'm not properly accounting for. I'm not a professional on this, believe it or not. But I think the takeaway here is that if you're worried that a 2048 SP version of the RX 580 is going to give you a terrible gaming experience, then you really don't have to worry. I mean, I only have these GPUs on hand to test, so maybe there are other versions of either the 2048 SP or the original RX 580 that do better or worse than these ones. I never liked this MSI version of the RX 580 that I have, to be honest. But honestly, I was really surprised at how well this Aisurix version did across all my testing, just in terms of the value of the performance that you get compared to what you spend. For those who don't know, the 2048 SP version of the RX 580 is a special version of the RX 580 that was released only in China. It's called the 2048 SP because it only has 2048 stream processors compared to the 2304 cores of the normal RX 580. That should mean that we get a little bit less performance on the 2048 SP version, in theory, but it's not a fake RX 580, as I've heard some people say. The 2048 SP is a real authentic AMD GPU that works basically as you'd expect an RX 580 to work, at least in my testing. The reason these RX 580 2048 SP GPUs are so cheap is that they're usually made from salvaged components. Sometimes it's just the GPU, but sometimes it's the GPU and the memory. My rule of thumb for choosing which one to buy is to pick from bigger companies. Some no-name company with terrible reviews on AliExpress might give you a good working GPU that they've tested properly, but maybe not, like what happened to me. Sticking with companies that actually seem like they care about their brand and reputation is just a good rule of thumb with this sort of thing. Now, after the last few years, we've been on a GPU price roller coaster. But even now that things have supposedly returned to quote-unquote normal, the newest GPUs are priced so high, and the GPU makers are all but ignoring the low end of the market, and it's a tricky situation when you're building a new PC on a tight budget. Do you go with a GTX 1650 or a RX 6500 XT? I think having something like this Aisurix RX 580 on the market is important as an entry-level GPU that offers great 1080p performance at a reasonable price so that someone can get started with their gaming rig without investing their retirement savings to do it. Speaking of which, the performance that we're getting here is just great for an entry-level GPU at an entry-level price. $120 and you can play any modern game, albeit at lower settings. And with the use of upscaling tech like FSR, we can get these games running pretty darn good too. This is a solid 1080p GPU, but you could go with 1440p if you make use of upscaling or accept a lower frame rate. But the big bonus that we get with this GPU is 8GB of VRAM. That'll let us max out our texture resolution in most games with minimal performance impact. High-res textures are one of, if not the most important graphics settings that makes a huge difference in visual fidelity, maybe second only to shadow quality. Running a game with low or medium settings but with high or ultra textures is a no-brainer for getting your games running great and also looking pretty darn good too. Now, whether or not this GPU will be good for your needs depends on a few things, but mainly it comes down to the games that you want to play and your display. If you're gaming at 1080p, then yeah, this GPU will work great, providing you're willing to accept lower settings in the most demanding games. But as you see, even in some pretty darn beautiful games, we can get some really good FPS results. I think it's a great choice if you're on a 1080p 60Hz monitor, or in esports titles, this can work well for like a 240Hz monitor. I don't think you'll find much to complain about at the price that this GPU is going for. Speaking of which, my previous recommendation for the best cheap GPU that you can buy for a budget gaming PC is the RX 6500 XT. So let's see how that GPU stacks up here. The Aisurix RX 580 2048 SP in our Witcher 3 benchmark gave us 68 FPS on average, and the 6500 XT at the same settings gave us 73 FPS. So it is better, in this game at least, but here's the thing, the Aisurix RX 580 costs $120, while the RX 6500 XT costs $165. If we do some back of the napkin math, that means that the Aisurix RX 580 gets an FPS per dollar value of 0.56. while the RX 6500 XT gets an FPS per dollar value of 0.44. That means that the Aisurix RX 580 is a 27% better value than the RX 6500 XT. Granted, there might be some other reasons that you'd want a 6500 XT. It's RDNA 2 based, so it has access to more driver level features, it's more power efficient, and it does perform better, obviously, if you're willing to pay for the privilege. However, it's got downsides too. It's only 4 gigabytes of VRAM. This Aisurix RX 580 is 8 gigabytes of VRAM. And as a budget entry-level GPU, something like this will give you great bang for the buck at the low end. I have no problem recommending the Aisurix RX 580. It has it where it counts in the price tag. $120, and this could be your new GPU for your budget build. I'll include a link to the product page on Amazon in the description below if you'd like to pick one up. And that brings us to the end. If you enjoyed this video, click the thumbs up button, or don't if you didn't, if you're going to be stubborn about it. Please consider subscribing if you haven't done that for some reason, and stop by my Discord server if you do that sort of thing. We got a fun bunch of tech dweebs over there, and you can be one of them. Until next time, I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Stay rife, my friends.